When we talk about materiality, free from material misstatements or fairly presented, we've got to be very comfortable with what those terms mean. So let's take a look at the concept of materiality. When we use the word materiality and we talk about something being material or not, we also use the term fairly presented in our auditing. These two basically mean the same thing. So if I say to you that something is material, we talk about something not being fairly presented. If it is not material, it is fairly presented. So the idea of materiality and fair presentation is put together. The first thing I want to be very careful about is the concept of presented. If you think about fair presentation of the financial statements, what do we mean by presentation? And to some extent, the best way to think about that is to shift the word presented and use represented instead, because that's basically what we're doing. When the directors put the financial statements together, what they're basically doing is summarizing all the financial information that took place during the year, all the transactions, the balances, and they are representing all of them on the financial statements. So those financial statements are supposed to be a representation, a summary of everything that happened throughout the year. The question is whether or not that information is reliable or not, and that's obviously what the users are interested in. They want to know, can I invest my money in this company based on the information that I'm looking at? Keep in mind that reliable in terms of financial statements is not the same as profitable. And this is very, very specific and very important to understand. When I'm looking at a company's financial statements as a user, I do not need the auditor to tell me whether or not that company is profitable. I can see that for myself. What I want to know is whether or not the profits that the directors have stated in those financial statements are reliable. And we've got to be very careful about that. The difference between reliable and correct, though, that's where the concept of material comes in. If something is not 100% accurate and not 100% correct, does that mean that it is not reliable? And that's where the term materiality comes from. Something may not be 100% accurate, but it may not affect your decision overall. You may look at it and say, well, it's 3 Rand out. You miscalculated this item by 3 Rand. Therefore, the financial statements, I still feel that they are reliable. If we use an example for materiality, let's say you're buying something online, a car, for example. You look online and you see photos of cars and you decide, I quite like that car based on the color, based on what it looks like, based on what I'm told about it on the profile. I think I'd like to buy that car. The problem with that, obviously, is that you can't see that car for yourself. You can't test drive it because you're looking at a flat picture on a screen with a description. Would it not be better for you if someone gave you an opinion, or if someone said to you, they, as an independent party, have looked at that car and that is what the car looks like, that is the condition, that is the model, that is the color, that is everything that you're looking for? You would feel far more comfortable about believing that what you're seeing is going to be what you get. The question is that 100% correct, or is it just reliable? If you look at that car yourself, if you went to go and visit that and you went to go and test drive that, chances are it would look slightly different. When you take the photo, the color might be slightly different to what it looks like. If you walk around to the other side of the car, there might be a slight scratch on it or a bit of a dent. So there's no way that that car is going to look 100% the same in real life as it does in the photo. The color is going to be a little bit off. There might be 1 or 2 scratches around the back. The question is, how far off from the photo does it need to be before you decide, wait a minute, this is actually not what I signed up for. This is not what I want. And a term that I often say to my students, think about, is if your user says, if I had have known, if I had have known this was what was really going on, I would not have invested in this company. If I'd have known that this is what that car really looked like, I would not have been interested in it. I would not have decided to buy that. So when we talk about that, we say, is there anything that might influence the user's decision? And again, we're always focusing on the user because that's who we're adding credibility for. Is there anything that would influence the user's decision? So if we take a look at a set of financial statements, for example, if I said to you that the profit for the year was 100,000 Rand, So the profit for the year is 100,000, and based on that you decide that you're going to invest in that company. Based on the fact that the profits are 100,000 rand, you say that's fantastic profits, I'm going to invest in that company. If I said to you tomorrow, I came to you and said, oh, I know you decided to invest in that company. There was a little bit of a mistake on the financial statements. The profit is not actually 100,000 rand. There was a little bit of an error. The profits are actually 99,000 rand. So they are 1,000 rand off. If that is the case, does that influence your decision? Would you say, if I had have known that the profits were only 99,000 rand, I would not have invested in that company? Would that influence your decision? The answer there is probably no. 1,000 rand is not going to make you decide that you wouldn't have invested in that company. If you'd have known that that was 1,000 rand incorrect, you probably would have said, really, it doesn't matter. It's not a problem. I still invest my money. However, if I say to you that the profit in the organization is not 100,000, it is actually only 10,000. With the difference between the 100,000 you thought it was and the 10,000 rand it actually is, would that influence your decision? Would you come back and say, look, if I'd have known that it was only 10,000 rand, I would have not invested in that company. The difference between what you thought it was and what it actually is, that's now 90,000 rand. Out. The answer is probably yes. You would definitely make a different decision, and you would definitely say, if I had have known this, I would not have invested in that company. In that case, we talk about the 1,000 rand here would be considered immaterial. Immaterial means that it is not material to the user's decision. It is not going to influence the user's decision, whereas our 90,000 rand is definitely material. It is definitely going to influence the user's decision. In this case, we talk about the fact that even though this is misstated, even though our 99,000 rand is misstated, so it is incorrect. Okay, it is not 100% correct. It is still considered fairly presented. Fairly presented. Even though it's not perfectly accurate, it is still fairly presented because it will not influence the user's decision. The misstatement will not influence the user's decision. However, in this case, we say this is not fairly presented, or it is not fair because the 90,000 rand misstatement would influence the user's decision. So you can see the concept of material versus correct is not quite the same. It is okay for something to be incorrect or misstated as long as it is not materially misstated. And our question there is, would it influence the user's decision? If the answer to that is yes, it would influence the user's decision, then it is material. If the answer is no, it would not influence the user's decision, then it is not material. So we have material by amounts. We look at this and say a 90,000 rand error is material and a 1,000 rand error is not material. Our question though is somewhere between our 1,000 rand error and our 90,000 rand error will be the turning point. So if 90,000 rand is material and 1,000 rand is not material, at which point would we switch from not material to material? And there would be a number in between there. For example, 1,000 rand is not material. How about 2,000, 3, 4, 5, 6? At which point do we say, oh, 9,000, maybe 9,999 rand is not material, but 10,000 rand is material? For example, at some point in time, there's going to be a specific switch. And for us as auditors, we have to calculate materiality. We calculate exactly what that number is. We are required to perform a calculation. We don't need to know what that calculation is for these purposes, but we actually calculate a number where we say at this particular number, 1 rand underneath that is not material, would not influence the user's decision. 1 rand above that will influence the user's decision. So we calculate materiality. We talk about this as material by amount. So in some cases, we have something that is material by amount. It is quantitatively material because of the number itself. However, remember we said that this item, the 1,000 rand here, was not material. It is not high enough to make me change my mind as an investor. However, what if I said to you that this 1,000 rand was misstated because of theft by the director? So the director committed some kind of fraud and the director stole money. Would you still consider that immaterial? Would you still say, oh, it's fine, if I'd have known that, it's not a problem? And the answer is probably no. Your answer to this would change. Even though it is just R1,000 and it wouldn't be considered material by amount, these items are considered material by nature. So material by nature basically means that it doesn't matter what the amount is. It could be R1, it could be 100,000 Rand. It doesn't matter what the amount is. But the nature of the misstatement, the nature, the type of error that it is, means that it doesn't matter how much it is, you would have changed your mind. It would influence your decision. And most of this comes down to fraud or items that are not legal, illegal transactions. We generally say, I want nothing to do with that. I would not invest in the company. Even if it's just R1, it's fraud. I don't want to touch it. So we have two different concepts of material. It's either material by amount, which we calculate as the auditors, or it's material by nature. And both of these, please keep in mind, both of these, when we talk about material, we talk about an indication of what would influence the user's decision. At which point would the users feel that a misstatement or an inaccuracy, an error, would influence the user's decision? I go back to the statement. In a lot of cases, when you're talking about materiality, ask yourself, if the user had have known, would it have influenced his decision? If the answer is yes, it's material. If the answer is no, it is immaterial or not material.